Heresies of the Large God by Brian W. Aldiss. I, Herod the Fourth, chief scribe, declare that this my writing may be shown only to priests of rank within the Orthodox Universal Sacrificial Church, and to the elders elect of the Council of the Orthodox Universal Sacrificial Church, because here are contained matters concerning the four vile heresies that may not be seen or spoken among the people. For a proper consideration of the newest and vilest heresy, we must look in perspective over the events of history. Accordingly, let us go back to the first year of our epoch, when the world darkness was banished by the huge God, our truest, biggest Lord, whom all honor and greatly fear. From this present year, 910 HG, it is impossible to recall what the world was like then, but from the few records still surviving, we can gather something of those times, and even perform the mental contortions necessary to see how the events must have looked to the sinners then involved in them. The world on which the huge God found himself was full of people and their machines, all of them unprepared for his visit. There may have been 100,000 times more people than there are now. The huge God landed in what is now the sacred sea, upon which in these days still sail some of our most beautiful churches dedicated to his name. At that time, the region was much less pleasing, being broken up into many states possessed by different nations. This was a system of land tenure practiced before our present policies of constant migration and evacuation were followed. The rear legs of the huge God stretched far down into Africa, which was not then the island it is now, almost touching the Congo River, at the sacred spot marked now by the sacrificial church of Bosoko Kete Ele, and at the sacred spot marked now by the church of Aden, obscuring the old port of Aden. Some of the huge god's legs stretched above the Sudan and across what was then the Libyan kingdom, now part of the Sea of Elder Sorrow, while a foot rested in a city called Tunis on what was then the Tunisian shore. These were some of the legs of the huge god on his left side. On his right side, his legs blessed and pressed the sands of Saudi Arabia, now called Life Valley, and the foothills of the Caucasus, obliterating the mount called Ararat in Asia Minor, while the foremost leg stretched forward to Russian lands, stamping out immediately the great capital city of Moscow. The body of the huge god, resting in repose between his mighty legs, settled mainly over 3 ancient scenes, if the old records are to be trusted, called the Sea of Mediterranean, the Red Sea, and the Nile Sea. He eradicated also with his great bulk part of the Black Sea, now called the White Sea, Egypt, Athens, Cyprus, and the Balkan Peninsula, as far north as Belgrade, now Holy Belgrade, for above this town towered the neck of the huge god on his first visit to us mortals, just clearing the roofs of the houses. As for his head, it lifted above the region of mountains that we call Italand, which was then named Europe, a populous part of the globe, raised so high that it might easily be seen on a clear day from London, then as now the chief town of the land of the Anglo-French. It was estimated in those first days that the length of the huge god was some 4,500 miles from rear to nose, with the 8 legs each about 800 miles long. Now we profess in our creed that our huge god changes shape and length and number of legs according to whether he is pleased or angry with man. In those days, the nature of God was unknown. No preparation had been made for his coming, though some whispers of the millennium were circulating. Accordingly, The speculation on his nature was far from the truth, and often extremely blasphemous. Here is an extract from the notorious Gersheimer paper, which contributed much to the events leading up to the First Crusade in 271 HG. We do not know who the Black Gersheimer was, apart from the meaningless fact that he was a scientific prophet at somewhere called Cornell or Carnell, evidently a church on the American continent, then a differently shaped territory. Quote, aerial surveys suggest that this creature, if one can call it that, which straddles a line along the Red Sea and across southeast Europe, is non-living, at least as we understand life. It may be merely coincidence that it somewhat resembles an 8-foot lizard, so that we do not necessarily have to worry about the thing being malignant, as some tabloids have suggested. Close quote. Not all the vile jargon of that distant day is now understandable, but we believe aerial surveys to refer to the mechanical flying machines which this last generation of the godless possessed. Black Gersheimer continues, quote, if this thing is not life, it may be a piece of galactic debris clinging momentarily to the globe, perhaps like a leaf clinging to a football in the fall. To believe this is not necessarily to alter our scientific concepts of the universe. Whether this thing represents life or not, we don't have to get all superstitious. We must merely remind ourselves that there are many phenomena in the universe as we conceive it in the light of 20th century science, which remain unknown to us. However painful this unwanted visitation may be, it is some consolation to think that it will bring us new knowledge of ourselves as well as the world outside our solar system. Close quote. Although terms like galactic debris have lost their meaning, if they ever had one, general trend of this passage is offensively obvious. An embargo is being set up against the worship of the huge God, or the heretical God of science, set up in his stead. Only one other passage from this offensive mishmash need be considered, but it is a vital one for showing the attitude of mind of Gersheimer and presumably most of his contemporaries. Quote, naturally enough, the peoples of the world, particularly those who are still lingering on the threshold of civilization, are full of fear these days. They see something supernatural in the arrival of this thing, and I believe that every man, if he is honest, will admit to carrying an echo of that fear in his heart. We can only banish it, and can only meet the chaos into which the world is now plunged if we retain a galactic picture of our situation in our minds. The very hugeness of this thing that now lies plastered loathsomely across our world is cause for terror. Imagine it in proportion. A centipede is sitting on an orange, or to pick an analogy that sounds less repulsive, a little gecko, 6 inches long, is resting momentarily on a plastic globe of the earth, which is 2 feet in diameter. It is up to us, the human race, with all the technological forces at our disposal, to unite as never before and blow this thing, this large and stupid object, into the depths of space from whence it came. Good night. Close quote. My reasons for repeating this initial blasphemy are these, that we can see here in this message from a member of the world darkness traces of that original sin which, with all our sacrifices, all our hardships, all our crusades, we have not yet stamped out. That is why we are now at the greatest crisis in the history of the Orthodox, universal, sacrificial Church, and why the time has come for a 4th crusade.